Today, we're visiting with Linda and Norm Bledsoe, long-term members here at Hope United Methodist Church, and they're going to tell us some of their memories of the activities and the people that they've known here at church. Tell me how you first heard about what we call Hope United Methodist Church.
Well, we visited because we thought it was time to join a church since the children were little, and we wanted to join someplace close to our home. And Norm was a Methodist growing up, and I was at the Swedish Covenant Church in Chicago. So anyway, we came to Hope and liked it, and Victor Schultz visited
Yes.
us numerous times. And how long before we joined?
I'm not sure how many weeks or months went by, but obviously we had to drive by the church every day to get home. So it was kind of like a lightning rod, kind of hard to avoid this structure, although it wasn't as big then as it became, because then we, at least by the time we joined, we had the fellowship, what today is Fellowship Hall. That was the church.
Yeah.
But
Well, and the church records show that you joined January 27th of 1980, and at that time, the Fellowship Hall was the church.
it was.
Right.
It was.
And it was that way first time you came?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
It was.
You
Yeah.
never did go over to the school or
No.
earlier
No.
iterations of it? That
We
building?
didn't. And the irony now is that a lot of people don't know it because they either haven't seen the plaque or been around long enough. But what today is Fellowship Hall is Victor Schultz.
Yes.
And that ties into really how we ended up joining, because Victor was tenacious. he would come by our house unannounced frequently.
Between 4 and 4:30 in the afternoon.
I think he heard that was happy hour in our house. But he would come and he's on your front porch. And for anybody that remembers him would know he was such a gentle, kind person. Hard to say you've come at a bad time, because it wasn't. He probably picks that time because people were there. So we had multiple exposures to Victor coming by the house, reinforcing why we should turn our visitations into a membership. And so we did. Victor was really the inspiration. And now today, what was the sanctuary at that time is Victor Schultz Hall. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily know that, because it's really just on the plaque, and then it would be word of mouth. But like I said, Victor was a tenacious, gentle, kind soul.
Yes.
But tenacious.
Well, Alton Brown was the pastor at that time, I
Correct.
believe. And do you remember things about Al Brown?
Oh, sure.
Al was a very laid-back pastor and a very congenial person, and
Yeah.
we enjoyed him.
Yeah, he was easy to sit through and listen. Now, and my recollection was, though, Al, I think, read his services, even though he did it in a very congenial way that wouldn't make it seem like he was word for word. But I remember his sermons being pretty much read. But what an easy, laid back guy, the kind of guy that we probably needed to reinforce why we wanted to start. You have that dip. Both of us grew up in a church environment as kids, but then you go through that period of time, you go off to college, and that becomes its own set of obligations and distractions, and a lot of people stop going to church at that point. And even as a young couple, without children, again, I think we bonded to go back to those days of church attendance because we had kids now.
Yeah.
Well, and we did visit churches when we were first married.
We did.
We were married in the Lutheran church in Littleton.
Yeah.
And we'd visited churches, but we didn't go every Sunday because we knew we were going to eventually join. And
Yeah.
then once Greg was born, we thought we need to.
Well, you mentioned your children were little. How old were they when you started coming here?
Greg was 18 months and Christy had just turned 5.
And they grew up in this church? I remember.
Yes,
They did.
they did.
Mhm.
So confirmation, youth group, and then Christy was married here. Greg was married in California.
Yeah. So, it's been very much a part of their early years. And because I remember we lived close enough to our church in just outside of Chicago that I could walk to church. And I do remember many times walking to church and my mom and dad were still at home. And so maybe because of that, I felt like we are going to be going we're not going to drag the kids to church, and not be there. So we all came as a family, and they were both involved in the youth program up to a point. I think when they got into certainly high school, but maybe even junior high, became less attentive to their
Well, they were-
programs.
Yeah. In high school, I think, towards the end, the last 2 years, they probably weren't as active in youth group, and yet they were the same age. Let's see, Ben Witt was
Yeah.
Greg's age, and J.J. Witt was Christie's age.
Yeah.
So they had good friends, and then there were others too.
And then
Jay Herman and Dosha.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
And it does take that. I mean, you can take the kids to the church or encourage them to go into a youth program. And with all of your background with the kids, I think you would reinforce that the kids need to be bonding with the other kids. If you're simply pushing them into a program and they're not into it, that's not going to
Yep.
work. So the kids that are most active are, I'm sure, the ones that have found that the other kids are fun to be with and around and reinforce why they're there.
yeah. Well, they both did confirmation and youth group, but then
Yeah.
towards, I don't know, junior, senior year, it seems like with all the testing and all the activities in
agree.
high school, they probably drifted away a little bit, not totally, but
Of course, our kids didn't have a Charlie Ledbetter,
Oh,
running the program, so that would have been maybe one reason why, as they got older.
I remember some of the parents,
Oh.
and we did youth group a couple times,
You mean as assistants or
Yeah.
mentors?
or did a program for,
And have the kids over to your house. or they come-
actually, we did it at church.
Did you?
Yeah, most of
Yeah.
them were church, yeah, but,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Well, you mentioned that first time you came to worship was in the fellowship hall. Tell us what that worship service was like. How'd they lay it out, or how'd they carry it out?
It
I
was fun.
remember
can't
the
remember
acoustics
details.
not being particularly
Oh, yeah.
good.
That's true.
Because it wasn't built, to be the sanctuary. And so some of the technology that we have now with the screen and the words up on the screen for music, none of that was there. But believe me, if you would have been some of those people that go back to the days of being in a school or even in a house, you would think, gee, a big place like this where everybody can be comfortable at the same time, I'm sure it was a big step forward. But if your benchmark was that facility, I could think back and the chairs were just regular chairs that had to be set up and taken down, and the acoustics again weren't designed for listening to a
And I
single
don't think
speaker.
we had an organ, I think it was a piano.
I
think you're right.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
might be, yeah. But I mean, again, if you didn't have that evolution, you could come in and say, this is the way it's supposed to be. We're all supposed to be together in a big area, and so we didn't progress through those early years of the beginning of the church when they were meeting, like I say, in a
I
house.
do remember
Yep.
standing up front the Sunday we joined, I can still picture us, because I was holding Greg, and I think you had Christie's
Yeah.
hand.
And did they have a parking lot that was paved? At one time, it was just a
Yeah,
dirt parking lot.
I think that's right. I think
Yeah,
it
I don't
wasn't
remember
it wasn't
that.
paid.
This is 39 years
I
ago.
know. It's been a while.
But it was really a lot of insight to even own that lot. I mean, to be at that premier lot in
I agree.
Greenwood Village, and at a time that there weren't any other churches. I don't think. What we know today is Church Row. Our church was really the first one there, and what a premier lot that
We
was.
did, yeah.
And so that, like I said, we had to drive past the church to get home. So well, what's going on
Well,
in
we
there?
lived in Cherry Creek Vista and then Hills East.
It was a
Yeah.
constant reminder because you drive by the church.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also remember a stage, kind of a stage. It was maybe risers that
Risers.
were up front, so
Yeah.
that there was some delineation for the choir to be sitting in a level above where everybody else's chairs were, and Al, as I recall, pretty much stayed to the lectern when he was preaching. I think it was really Margaret that began the concept of not being tied to the lectern,
Yeah.
and feeling comfortable about walking around and being maybe more bonded to the service than standing behind a lectern or a pulpit. And so as I recall, Al was, and that makes sense given that my recollection was he was reading his service, that he would want to be somewhere where his notes would
He
be in
was
front
just a
of him.
very relaxed person, laid back and
And-
easy to talk to.
And his wife, wow.
Laura.
Yes.
Laura, I
Laura
mean, that,
Brown was,
that was truly a
Very good.
package for the
Yeah.
church. A husband and wife that really truly were in it as a team.
Yes.
and they were older, so we didn't see their children.
Right.
That's
Here.
true.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yes. I agree. Laura was a big part of that
She was.
ministry and
Yeah.
very active in the
Right.
church.
Yeah.
Well, you remember the plans then to build the sanctuary and raise the money and do all that? Al
I
Brown
remember,
started that,
yeah.
and then Dr. Vickery kind of finished some of
Right.
that up.
I remember being on that committee. We had Tom Sheldon was the architect, Dave Hull was very much the construction consultant on the committee. I'm trying to think who else was on. I mean, it wasn't that we did it, but I remember being part of that process, and it was an exciting time.
I can't
to,
remember who did the furnishings, the gal
Yeah,
that was
the
in
planning.
charge. The
And of course, you might recall the financing of the what today is the sanctuary was not easy. As a matter of fact, we thought we had some financing tied up with, I don't know if you can think back, that Trinity Church downtown had just come into a windfall
yeah.
of money. As a developer myself, I could understand what was going on, that there was a surrounding property owner, a developer, that had purchased the air rights over Trinity Church to literally build over the top of the church. And because it was right there at Broadway and I want to say 18th.
That's right.
And so the developer paid a lot of money to Trinity for that right. Ultimately, the developer never built that project, but they paid a lot of money to Trinity. And the rumor was that Trinity felt a commitment to get that money out to other churches that qualified for whatever that criteria was. That concept never happened for us. That when we thought that was going to be the most logical source of money for the new church, went away. And that's when, and I'm trying to think if it was Marilyn Barber's husband, Pete, came in as a fundraising guru.
Oh, that long ago.
And created a program where people could purchase bonds.
Yeah.
I
And so-
remember him coming to us.
So the new sanctuary was actually financed internally from the membership of the church. And I remember taking some, because it was just a lateral move, people could take money out of an existing, like either an IRA, we had some college funds set up for the kids. And so for us, it wasn't necessarily new money, but us, and I'm sure obviously a lot of other people stepped up and bought these bonds, and they paid maybe 5%. It would
Be a lot. It would be great.
But in those days, not so much.
Then you thought, well, we really want to do this for the church, but they raised enough money selling bonds that our sanctuary was financed internally from within the congregation. We never did need to go out to an independent source like Trinity, but in that case, it really fell through anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm never really sure why, but we were never able to secure a loan from Trinity, but it was okay. What we did was even better.
It worked out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, after Dr. Vickery moved into the new service and we got mostly settled in the new sanctuary, tell us some of the memories you have of Dr. Vickery.
Well, like I've always said, and to Norm, he was a very philosophical preacher, I thought. And so he was a nice fellow, but he wasn't as warm as
Yes.
Al Brown.
I think, in fairness to him, he came in on the heels of a very warm and gentle soul, and so in some cases the difference in approach were stark, and for some people it wasn't maybe would have been their first choice.
Well, and he didn't have a wife with him, it was just
Yes.
him, so there was no family with
Yeah.
him as
Yep.
part of the church.
Yep.
And I can't remember how long he was here, 4 or 5 years?
Yes, I believe that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was good.
He was a good preacher, he was just very philosophical.
I would say anybody that would have come in on the heels of Al or Sam Day would have had some big shoes to fill.
Well, that brings us to Sam Day. He was a favorite for many of us. Tell us
Yes.
what you remember about Sam Day.
His good news.
Yeah,
He was just a very congenial person as well, and his wife Barbara was active here at church, so that was nice too. And they were older when they came, older than us, and so she was in UMW, and I was in UMW at the time.
Yeah.
So I just liked Sam.
Well, and Sam, his niche about his sermons were they were always a three-pronged title for the service, and they were completely, absolutely unrelated. Three, just I could make them up, and it wouldn't be as off the wall as his three different titles of the same service. And the way he would tie those in was magical. That he could take three what seemingly were unrelated topics, and that was his sermon's speech. I mean, that was the title of his sermon. And he would tie all three of those unrelated topics, and so it just shows he was really good on his feet. Now he may have been also when I mentioned Margaret, who would come later, but Sam, as I recall, also felt comfortable away from the podium and the lecturing, and he would walk.
He always had a big smile on his face as he was delivering his
Yes.
sermon.
And of course, the Sam Day Good News Award, named after that, because that was maybe the underlying theme of every one of his sermons was good news.
Yeah.
That you're here today to hear the good news.
I remember that, what you mentioned, that he would always say, and I have good news.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, now what is it today?
That's right.
But I'm trying to think if Sam, because we'll talk later about Margaret and her entry into our church, but it seemed to me, was Sam also a district superintendent?
Yes, before he
Yeah,
came here as
yeah.
a pastor.
So interesting, selection of career path, that after he had been our district superintendent, he really wanted to get back into the actual congregation. If you're a people person, I could see why you really miss something when you're promoted
Yep.
out of the preaching aspects, and then you get into the business of the Methodist Church.
But I remember he loved to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so Sam, in that respect, and as I say, we'll
So
talk
he was
about Margaret.
more down to earth, which
Yeah.
is kind of what we like.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree. Well, after Sam Day was here, we tried co-pastorate with John Lee and Margaret Hankins.
Right.
You remember those days?
I do.
Very well.
Yeah. Tell us what you remember about Margaret.
Well, an interesting
Well-
scenario. At the time, I was chairman of SPR, and my office was just down the street in the Denver Tech Center. And I remember Margaret calling me. We knew we were going to get a new pastor because Sam had already been. Was he reassigned? There was a fire to be put out. I want to think up in Fort
I
Collins.
believe that's right. You went to Fort Collins.
Yeah, not by
First
choice,
Methodist.
but he was. They go where they're asked to go. So I knew we were in line for another pastor. And I remember Margaret calling me and asking me for an appointment to come in and talk to me about our new pastor. So I'm in my conference room, not here at the church, in my office, and Margaret walks in with John. So I'm assuming that the
New
the
pastor.
talk was going to be about introducing me to John. And it wasn't long that I realized that she was actually floating the idea of a co-pastorate. And again, like Sam Day, because at that time Margaret was our district superintendent, that floating the idea that they both had a reason to want to, in effect, be somewhat part-time. I mean, where they could take the one job and work it together. As you might remember, John was winding down a bit. He wasn't
Yes.
looking for a new full-time assignment. And Margaret may have been also feeling like she wanted to get back into the pastoral aspects of her ministry. And so it was introduced to me as a co-pastorate. And that was our first female pastor.
That's right.
And we have not been without a female pastor since. So it seemed revolutionary at the time, but in retrospect, it was absolutely the right thing to do. And it alerted us that not only could a female pastor do a great job for us, but the concept of a co-pastorate, theoretically equal. I think probably Margaret took on a little bit more
Margaret
of
was
being
more
the
like
point
a
person.
senior
Yeah.
type
But-
pastor.
But
Yeah.
it was a terrific transition at a time when we really needed.
And yet there
that.
were questions. I mean,
I
some people
remember
had
that.
questions
Sure.
about we're having a female pastor.
Yeah,
You know.
She was a bit of a pioneer.
Yeah.
absolutely.
But I remember when he came home and said, Dr. John Lee, I said, wait a minute. I took a class from that person, if it's the same one, because I was always renewing my teaching certificate and I was taking classes.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was the same person. When I met him, I had just had him for class
Yeah.
the year previous.
Well, and he had a background in psychology, I believe,
Right,
and
so the class,
counseling.
yes, was
and had
on.
come into some pretty difficult situations in other churches where they needed somebody to have a steady hand
Right,
and
yeah.
able to do it.
Right.
And I already knew Margaret because she and I served on another committee outside our church here. It was the Board of Metro Ministries. And again, because she was our district superintendent, she was on there. I was simply on there because I got appointed to be on there from here. That particular board was the group that looked for sites for other churches. Matter of fact, that was Margaret was on, we were on at the same time. That's when the site that currently the land
Yeah.
is on. It was out there on Powhatan, and it seemed like it was halfway to Kansas.
It's the middle of nowhere.
Well, now it's not as far for us
That's
since we
true.
live out east.
But that was,
Yeah.
that was one of the roles of the Board of Metro Ministries, was to look for sites and acquire sites. And so I had met Margaret and knew her from that experience before she came here. But I look back in retrospect and I think that what a terrific era that we had both of them, because they both had so much to give. They just didn't want the full-time responsibility of running a church. Because as you know, it's more than the spiritual leadership that a
Yes.
pastor, it's a business.
A business.
And there's a budget, and there's people involved, and there's a lot more than just preparing.
Well, and all the
a-
visitations.
Yeah. And actually, that's where Vic Schultz was at his best, yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, we didn't have anybody like that.
Everybody loves it.
Yeah, hard to say no.
But, and I did the Bible study with Margaret at 6:30 in the morning here on Wednesday mornings
Oh, boy.
for probably 8 to 10 years. Well, I did it until we moved out east.
Okay, yeah.
And if I was teaching on this side of town, then I would go there first. But if I was teaching out where we are now, I didn't.
Yeah.
But Margaret, well, that's the next pastor too.
Yeah, tell us what you remember about Margaret.
Well, I liked Margaret a lot, and she and I connected well. But then she did the wedding for
All
our
right.
daughter, along with
Steve Miller?
Steve Miller.
Yes.
Yeah.
She then later was a co-pastorate with Steve Miller.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, after John Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah, John left.
And that's, well, Christy will be married 18 years in August, so 18 years ago, she and Steve Miller did our daughter's wedding here at Hope,
Yeah.
which was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Margaret had a terrific style. Actually, they both did. She and John both, worked the stage. I mean, they would move around. They weren't tethered to either notes or the podium. And it was really kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling that both of them brought to the table. They were different in their approaches. I think John was maybe a little more structured in a biblical sense.
John Lee.
Yeah,
was the- yeah.
to his sermons, and Margaret was maybe a little more freewheeling. And maybe not quite as much as Clare is now. Clare is just wonderful in that regard, and we can talk about her too. But yeah, she can take a sermon that is biblically oriented, but really drives it right into the everyday lives of people. But Margaret was like that, and I think that's what made a lot of us really happy
A
about
little
that
bit more
transition.
formal.
Yes.
Yeah.
But she was wonderful.
Yeah.
We've had
Yeah.
some good pastors, and when you think about it, the Methodists are notorious for moving pastors around. 5 years in some cases is kind of it. And so when people either join or leave a church because of a specific pastor, as we have had in
Sure.
cases of some of our new pastors, you wonder maybe where they're really where they're tethered to the congregation. Are they here because of the pastor, which would be understandable, or are they here for the bigger picture? And when people, leave or join because of a specific pastor, the history of the Methodist Church is you better understand this is not going to be the
They
person.
move every
Yeah.
5 to 6 years.
This person may not do your funeral for you because they're going to be gone long before you are.
Well, Margaret was here the longest, I think,
I
of,
think so.
of anybody we've had.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was great. And I think that's the way she wanted it, because this is the way she ended
Yeah.
her career,
And
was here at Hope.
after she retired, she and Jim came back here.
Right.
Which
She
is
had to
very
s-
unusual for.
Right, they had to
pastors.
stay away, I believe, for 6 months.
Yeah, there was a period
There
of
was
time.
a period, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that they weren't allowed to
come
come
back,
back.
yeah.
Well, I guess, because it does create maybe some confliction of affection when people are tied to somebody like a Margaret or an Al Brown or a Sam Day. those are big shoes to fill for anybody that comes in, and it makes it harder if there's that presence there.
Yeah.
Steve, it was Steve Miller next, as I recall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Steve handled it so well, and certainly built his own following of people that were ready to accept the transition. And so he was the right person at that time. I think Steve came in from a rural area in Indiana.
I believe that's right. He
Yeah,
did move here
he
from
did.
Indian.
And he wanted
And
to-
there again, he had a wife and their daughter
Yeah,
that were here.
yeah, and so, and I think his motivation
She was
was,
in youth group at the time.
he really wanted to be in a Colorado environment where they can be up into the mountains.
He was an outdoor
Yeah.
person
So,
as far as
yeah, and
camping
yeah,
and the theater too.
right, yeah, he's a theatrical kind of guy,
Yeah.
and
And the
he-
daughter was too. Well, actually, so was Lissa.
Sure, yeah, Lissa was,
They- so-
they were a great team. We've had the
Yeah.
luxury of having some great teams where the husband and wife are both, committed to the concept of the church
Yeah.
and participate. Yeah.
So
Well, after Steve Miller and Margaret were moved or retired, Steve Warren came to be the pastor, and he was a sole pastor here. You remember Steve Warren?
yes, I do.
Yeah. What are your
But
memories of
I
him?
don't remember. I mean, I can picture him and everything. I don't remember him as clearly with his preaching and thing as some of the other pastors. I don't know why. He was fine, but we didn't get to know him as personally as we have the others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's-
maybe that was just his style. And he wasn't here, maybe just about 4 years, I think.
Does your, because I've,
Six.
He was
He
here
was
6
here
years?
6 years?
2005 to 2011.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
That's longer.
okay,
And I believe he had a son at Cherry Creek, and so he stayed, I think, till that son graduated.
See, and I
Yeah,
don't
maybe
remember
remember.
that. And usually we got to know all our pastors and their families.
Yeah,
I think he went up to Boulder, as I recall.
that's right.
Maybe, was he divorced? Maybe that's why I don't
I don't think
remember
so.
Steve
No.
Warren having a wife either.
Yeah. She was not active in the church,
Well,
but
maybe,
Okay.
okay.
he was married. I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, and didn't even remember him having a son.
Yeah, and I think, once again, I think his move to the Boulder Church was also to maybe put out a fire, like Sam's appointment after here, where there were just issues that church. I have no idea what church it is, but I think.
I wonder if he's still preaching up there, or if he's retired.
I don't know.
Yeah, don't
Well,
know.
if he left here in 11, that's just 8 years ago.
Yeah, so I don't want to just put it on Linda. I don't remember a whole lot that could burn up a lot of time
Sure.
talking about
And,
Steve.
and we connect differently with different
Sure.
personalities
Right,
and
yeah.
different
And
people.
I didn't
agree.
feel like, I mean, we knew him, he was fine, but we didn't get to know him personally like we have all the others.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why. Maybe because there was no family here either.
Well, Norm, you mentioned that after Margaret came as a female pastor, we've had female pastors here as a continuity part of our plan.
Yeah.
Tell us what some of the things you remember about Marla Lesser, who was an associate pastor here.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
I forgot about
You
her.
know, I got to work with her on SPR, and that was a strong suit for her because she really could see how staff needs to commingle with the congregation, and it's probably partly because she had been a pastor before. So on SPR, she was so helpful with trying to commingle the relationship, because that's what SPR tries to do with the staff and the members of the church. She was always in some health issues that I think really diminished, in her mind, her effectiveness to be able to get around and be with a lot of people. She was good in our environments within the committee meetings, and certainly one-on-one.
And her husband was always around.
Yeah, and
as
Al
well.
was good. So I found her to be very, very helpful for SPR in the case of just getting out and being with large groups. I think she always felt maybe a little constricted in terms of what she could do. I'm trying to think of the ailment that she had, but it was a life-threatening
I can't
ailment.
remember what she
I can't think what it was, but her health was an issue almost the entire time I knew her.
She had trouble walking.
Yeah. I'll probably, it'll just jump in my mind and I'll pop it back in. But no, I think Margaret really did set the pattern that everybody knew that a female pastor could be very, very good and effective to the point that we haven't been without a female
Well,
pastor.
Margaret had an extremely good background coming into
I
our
think so.
church as a
Yeah.
pastor.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
Marla Cowers was another lady we had here as
Oh, gee,
associate
yeah.
pastor. You remember Marla?
Vaguely, she was a small, petite lady, and I do remember her.
Yeah, I don't remember working with her in any way as a result of a
But
committee
she wasn't
assignment.
the pastor. She
No,
was
she
an
was associate
assistant.
pastor.
She was
Yeah,
associate
associate,
pastor.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I wish I could give you more background, because we certainly overlapped her time here. I just don't remember enough about her to give you any insight.
And there again, I don't remember a family with her either.
I thought, though, and it may be a testament to how committed we became to the, not only the co-pastorate concept, but a female as part of the team, that there was some, as I recall, some hard feelings when Marla left, because a lot of people didn't want to see her go.
Yes.
And there could have been some issues between her and maybe the other pastor at that time, or other staff
Who was
members, I'm
she
not
here
sure.
under then?
She was Steve Warren.
With Steve Warren?
Steve Warren, okay, yeah, I just remember that there was some hard feelings
Yeah.
when she was let go, because typically people aren't let go. They
Well,
decide
I'm not
to-
sure Steve was one of the favorite pastors we've had.
Yeah.
I mean, he was fine, but like I said earlier, he wasn't one that you got to know real personally and
Yeah.
stuff. And I know there were a few people that didn't care for him. We were fine with him, but,
Yeah.
and-
Well, more recently, we had Stephanie Price. You remember Stephanie?
Yeah,
how can we forget Stephanie? Yes.
Tell us what you
She worked hard. She really did. And she did a lot of the visitations
Yeah.
as well. And I thought Stephanie was a good speaker. I really did.
she's high energy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she will be high
And
energy.
she was young, and
Yes.
her
Yeah.
family was here, and there were a lot of positives about Stephanie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and you mentioned the land, where she was later assigned
Right.
to take
Yeah.
that project and bring it to fruition.
I think it's going pretty well, because we just got an email about some celebration of a year,
I think so too.
so.
Yeah, I think Stephanie always wanted to do more than was here for her, because she really, I think.
She
could-
wanted her own church, I think.
And
Yes.
that's a great aspiration.
Yeah.
And the land had literally been dormant since the day when we first acquired it a long time
Which
ago.
is 20 or 25 years
Yeah,
before.
it just sat there, and there was no, the demographics hadn't caught up with it in terms of putting a church there. The site was deliberately over-purchased to be able to break off some land
For
to sell.
growing and
And then the balance for
Yeah.
the church.
Or
And none of that
planting.
happened, yeah.
Yeah.
Because the thought was that selling some of the land would provide the seed money for the actual brick and mortar of a new church. But when I say the demographics, there's just not, the population base hadn't filled in yet out
it,
there.
it still hasn't, but they do say that there
Yeah.
will be homes built, and they have the garden out there to plant the crops and things.
Yep.
And I guess there will be a church someday there. I don't know if it will be in our lifetime.
And, or what it looks like. It may
Right,
not be like
right.
this church. Or
And then
it
that
may
will
Yeah.
be her church,
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
So
Yeah.
she's got a lot on her plate.
She does have a lot to offer, and she was actually one of the few pastors that wanted to sit in on SPR meetings. She just wanted to be part of that process. The pastors are always members of the SPR committee, but in reality, because our meeting schedule for committees so overlap,
Yeah.
that on a meeting night, there could be 5 committee meetings going, and the pastors are members of just about every one of those committees. So, they've got to pick and choose where they can be. And I just remember Stephanie really wanting to be part of the SPR experience and offer a lot. And I just, like I say, she's high energy. She will perpetually look young. I think we thought, she was somebody's daughter,
Yeah.
instead of our
Well, I
pastor.
don't think she's 40 yet. Otherwise, she's close.
Yeah.
I think she's about 38.
Yeah, so, yeah, and so, yeah, good memories of her, and we all wish her and the land well. I think now at least she's being fulfilled. I know her plate is full.
Yes.
Because that's a test to start
Yeah.
something, not just a new church, but a completely different concept of a church. It's not like building a brick and mortar and people will come. You've got to really draw people in without a whole lot to show, and that's a test.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Well, Don Bird came to be the senior pastor here not so long ago. And,
Right. He was here 6 years, if I remember right.
2012 to 2018, that's right.
6
He was
years,
here
that's
for
what I
6
thought.
years.
And of course, everybody was disappointed to see him,
Yes,
including himself.
I agree.
But it was nice to see his wife and daughter in church today,
I
just
know, that was
because
fun.
of Haley being a senior and graduating.
We think she grew up in this church, even though she was a junior high, I guess, when they came. But
Right.
She's another one that will always look young.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Don actually,
And that was a transfer for him. He wasn't planning on that.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, he was up in the mountains, so he came down, to a very commercial environment, because Greenwood Village might have had the image of being, above average in the demographics of
Yes.
people to be mentored. But Don had, and I don't know if he was the first one. I just remember it more than the others if there were. He wanted to have these meet and greet sessions with smaller groups of people. And so and it was his idea. I think maybe he'd done it before, but there was probably 6 or 7 different meetings of smaller groups, and it seems like we've done it ever since. So
Even in the homes.
yeah, in the
Oh,
homes.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember him saying, I think at the time he might have been 40 years old.
That's about
Because there
right.
was some joke about him saying something about being 40, and everybody in the room was probably 65.
Well, not everybody. A few people had younger children.
Yeah, but he reached out to get to know people. I've got to believe that's got to be one of the hardest things about bumping into or changing churches every 5
I
or
think
6
so.
years. You pick up a whole new group of people that immediately want your new spiritual leader to know you and what you've been and just warm and fuzzy feelings. And it's hard to do that when
And how long had he been at the last church before he came here?
I don't know.
I'm not sure, yeah.
Quite a while.
But
I think it might have been one of his first churches.
But these meet and greets were effective. They were good for us, but I also believe it's a good way for the pastor to begin to bond in a smaller environment. That's why committee, honestly, with all the committees we've been on, that's a terrific way to get to know people better than when you're all walking out, the door at the end of a service. To get into a committee environment where you're now with 5 or 6, 7 other people, and you can get to know them better. And I think that was also in the case of Don. It gave him a real shot at getting to know people
Well, and his
faster.
wife took an active part as
Yes.
well.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And his kids were here and
And
active.
his
and
children,
big part
yeah.
of the church.
That's probably one of the youngest pastors we'd ever had done.
Yeah.
Well, besides Stephanie.
yeah, I remember Mandy trying to bond with me right after I met her. And she had said something. She knew I played a lot of golf. And she came up and she said, I understand you really do well in the 19th hole. And I said, well, yeah, but do you realize that's not really a golf course? Somebody had said something to her about the 19th. It was a setup. Somebody came up and I said, yeah, I enjoy the 19th hole.
She was very naive about golf.
But I just know it was
She
a
will
setup.
not forget that.
Yeah. So it was. But even a little war story like that is enough to kind of endure yourself,
Yes.
to somebody, because now you've got a bond that goes back. Because we will still joke about the 19th hole.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, and she, it was nice to have a whole family here, and she got right into the women's things and did a Bible study and
Yes.
did the women's group and stuff. So she was the whole family was an asset to the church.
I agree.
But as I say, they were the youngest ones, besides Stephanie.
I think so. I think so.
And Stephanie came while he was here.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he was here first.
It's nice when it's a joint venture between the husband and wife when they make that transition to a new church, because we always assume that the pastor had the calling and truly wanted to be on that kind of a career path. That doesn't necessarily mean that the spouse feels the same way.
That's right.
And so to have that kind of a partnership really probably makes their marriage better, because if you're on the opposite page on that topic, you're going to have a tough time. But it's terrific for the congregation. But like I say, it's not written anywhere that each has that same calling to be that involved. And yet with Don and Mandy, there was no question.
Well, I saw her this morning, but I didn't have a chance to talk to her. Hopefully he's happy where he is.
I think so. He's really
That's
busy.
good. I bet he is,
Yeah, he's
because
very
that
busy.
congregation was, what, 3 times the size of ours?
Yes.
Yeah, certainly bigger than ours, yeah.
Well, Pastor Clare McNulty Drews is the senior pastor here now. What are your thoughts about Pastor Clare?
Well, she's been here, what, not quite a year,
Just about a year.
and I think she's very well liked, and I like her. I love her a lot. I think she's great. I like her sermons. It's not difficult to pay attention. I mean, it's, you enjoy what she's saying, and it's not like you're bored with anything or whatever. And she ties everything from scriptures to everyday life, which is very nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had already alluded to that. I think she's terrific. She's the right person. And I'm not sure that this was an early calling for her. I think that she didn't get into the pastorate until a little bit later on, that she had a life before the ministry. But today might have been the most graphic, but in general, her ability to just take a biblical topic and really drive it home for everyday people and everyday experiences. I mean, today, with the graduation being the underlying theme of the topic,
She related
it was
it
almost
well with the
tearjerker.
videos she showed.
I thought you did too.
Yeah.
But she's really good, and she doesn't mind bringing her family into the conversation of the sermon.
Well, that helps to identify her to everybody.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So I think she's wonderful, and hopefully we won't lose her soon. But like I said, the Methodist Church has a history of moving people around, and so you have to either have a long-term look at what you're here for, or be frustrated now and then that that's not the person you want up there. And I think there are people that do kind of bond to the person so much that it really diminishes their affection for the church when that change happens. But Claire will certainly have a great following
I
at the
haven't
time
heard
she's
of
ready to
anybody
move on.
that is unhappy with her.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to.
I think so.
And she did a
Has
lot of this
received
meet
her
and
well.
greet. Yeah, and she did a lot of the meet and greet.
Yeah, we did one at our house for
Yeah,
her.
and it was great, and there wasn't a topic that wasn't allowed to be talked about, and she just took on everything. Because I'm trying to think, I think people were concerned, at least at our house, about the diminishing roles. The role of how many people we have at our church.
Attendance.
Attendance and just membership, and she took it head on, and so there wasn't anything she wasn't willing to talk about, and certainly address and try to make better. So, yeah, she's great, and I like Paul. I don't think maybe Paul's on your list because we don't know what Paul's future role is
Right.
here,
That's right.
because
Well,
I think he's still a
He
student.
just kind of stepped in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he happened to be here when we
And
needed
he's still
somebody.
at the
Yeah.
seminary at
Right.
Pilot. Yeah.
But he's very articulate and warm and personable,
Yeah.
and they're a great team right now. I don't know how much longer we'll get to keep that team, but right now
But
between the
keep
two of
him,
them.
you mean,
Yeah.
because he may be
Yeah.
reassigned. But
Yeah.
hopefully Claire will be here for a while.
Yes.
I think so.
Right.
Well, Linda, you mentioned that you were part of the United Methodist Women, the UMW.
I was for a long time, and then
And
when
you're
I
part of a Bible study at 6:30 in the morning?
with Margaret,
You know,
yes.
what other roles have you served here at the church?
And I've been on lots of committees, and some of them have been renamed today, but I served on evangelism and lay leadership and stewardship, all 3. And I was on, today you are only supposed to serve for a maximum of 3 years when you're on a committee, but I was on evangelism for about 7 or 8. And that, I was making phone calls every year to get people to serve on committees. And then I've also made coffee for 25 years, about once a month. And I did it myself for a long time, but now it's too heavy, so Norm does it with
All
me.
right, good.
Yeah, that's my contribution. Nobody
I've
wants
done
to
that
drink
for
the coffee
25
I would
years,
make. Yeah.
And I also remember when I was on evangelism and lay leadership that we always had carnations to welcome first-time visitors. So I brought carnations to church every Sunday for 8 years.
Yeah.
I'd pick them up at the florist the day before and bring them
I remember
on
that.
Sunday.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I was quite involved.
Yeah.
I said to Norm, I remember I ran the very first garage sale / rummage sale Hope ever had, and Carolyn Houlihan was our treasurer at the time.
Yeah.
And it's years ago because I can remember our children being younger and like in elementary school. And we had this idea through UMW, and I said I would run it. And we made $3,000, and Carolyn Houlihan was ecstatic. That was just a lot of money back, probably 30 years ago at least, if not 35. Yeah.
Well, as you probably know, Carolyn was a charter member of this
Right.
church.
Yes.
Right.
And one of my regrets is that she passed away before I was able to sit down with her and have her tell us about
yeah.
the early formation of this church, because she played a big part in that.
She did, and she was the one that got me. They had a ladies bridge group back then, and she was the one that got me into playing that. So I'm probably the have been in that bridge group longer than anybody else that's in it now. So yeah, I connected well with her as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, Norm, you mentioned staff parish, and I believe finance. You served on other committees and roles
Yeah.
here at the church.
Yeah, it was really a good way to feel, again, connected, like I mentioned earlier, by being part of a smaller group. And I will tell you, because my committee assignments have gone from finance, SPR, these are in some cases multiple tours of duty,
Yes.
but SPR, the lay leadership,
You followed me on lay leadership. I got off and then he got on.
You got a family?
There are certain committees that, lay leadership is the committee that actually populates the other committees.
Yeah.
And,
That was the one I
and
made all the
sometimes
phone calls
people,
for. I don't know. I was on both of them so long. That,
well, some people, if you're on lay leadership, they'll avoid you in fellowship hall because that's a person that ought to be on a committee. So you don't want to serve on that committee too long, or nobody will talk to you. But
yeah, I was
honestly,
on that a long time, and then I went from that to evangelism.
yeah. But lay leadership, SPR, trustees. What I've always regretted, though, the committee assignments I've had have always been fairly non-spiritual committees, more program-type committees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, SPR, you're talking about your
Personnel,
staff.
human relations.
Trustees is kind of the brick and mortar of the
Yes.
church. Lay leadership, getting people to serve on committees. These assignments that I've taken on haven't been particularly the program, the more spiritual parts of the committee assignments. And maybe that's a little bit of a regret. And we're both sort of in a sabbatical right now. I just stepped off of trustees back in January. So this year it's easy maybe not to be on a committee and just kind of let that discipline of committee meetings. It's not what goes on between the committee meetings, because now you're on your own time and you can get those things done.
Oh, we have a longer drive at night to get here and
Sure.
home.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
because
being-
I was on those 3 committees for like 25 years.
But
And
there
so
are
it's been 2 years now since I've been on a committee. This is my second year off.
But there are other committee assignments that are, in fact, are more spiritual, where you're dealing with people as opposed to brick and mortar.
Yes.
And maybe starting next year, it would be time to get on that type of a committee. I mean, I'm not even sure what all the names are now of those kind of committees. You mentioned evangelism, but I think there's another
And
name
that's another
for it
name
now.
for that now, and I don't know what it is.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, but there are ways to serve. I mean, we serve by greeting and making coffee and
Ushering.
and just step down from
Yes.
ushering. But those are 1-day assignments.
Yeah, and they're easy, and
it's
they
not-
always need help. Never get enough people to make coffee.
Yeah,
So we make it once a month
right.
and have for,
And the biggest test she mentioned is getting the pot up on the ledge.
well, I did
That's
it for
pretty heavy.
years. Yeah, because I could jump up when I was younger and lift it myself. I'd come over on Saturdays.
Yeah.
But now, 80 cups is too heavy.
We'll figure out a way to do it, or just put it on a cart or something, so that, actually, that wouldn't be a bad idea, but it wouldn't look as nice maybe as it, but no, we've lost Nancy Duncan and Ed, I can't think, as I've just forgotten.
And of
Ed's
course, the Federoffs used to make coffee, and the Lindauers used to make coffee.
yeah.
So now it's a different crew. We're still there, but
It's just us
everybody
younger
else is.
people, the younger people in the church, they can still lift the coffee pot, that's the criteria, so,
But that's an easy way to help out, and it's very well, it's needed.
yeah.
On behalf of everybody here at the church, I want to thank you for all of your service. Years ago, we established the Sam Day Award, which was for outstanding volunteer service to this church. And you two were honored as recipients of that award because of all the things that you've done here. And I want to echo that thanks and acknowledgement to you.
Well, thank you,
Well,
Charlie.
thank you.
And obviously you have been part of it ever since we were. I mean,
Yeah.
so you're just generally behind the camera, so people don't get to see, you know, your smiling face in pictures because, and I think you took over, was there any gap between you and John Lindauer?
Oh, in the
terms of
photo
be-
album?
I was the
He followed
historian
it.
that followed John.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I
he
thought.
followed John.
Yeah,
And
and,
I don't know what we're gonna do if you retire.
well, he's not allowed to, you know, you're gonna have to get a vote of 2/3 of the congregation for you to step down, and that's not likely, so.
But you know, this has all been important to us too, that we've volunteered, because that's how you get to know people and that's how you enjoy
Yes.
your church more. You're more involved, and
Yeah.
so it's been,
It really
I
does
guess
add
that's why
value.
we stayed for 39 years plus.
Yeah,
Well, you
really-
mentioned that your family was young when you
Yeah.
started here, and your kids were baptized here and were confirmed
Actually,
here.
they were baptized in our church at home.
Were they?
So that our parents could be there.
Yeah, and they're part of confirmation
But they
here.
they both were confirmed here, and they were both in youth.
Your daughter was married.
And Christy was
here?
married here by Margaret and
Steve
Steve
Miller.
Miller.
Yeah. Well, tell us what this church family has meant to you and your family.
Well, it's been very important in our lives. I mean, socially, not in all with, not including all the or including all the committees and things we've served on. We got involved socially with different groups too, because I've been in the bridge group for years. We were in congenial members for years, and then we also were with friends that traveled to Pagosa to play golf every year in the fall.
Yeah.
So, you know, we had social things here too, not just religious things.
Yes.
So it's been a good home for us.
Yeah, I think that's really important about bonding to the people. You're less inclined then to be passing judgment about the leadership of the church. And I don't mean the volunteer committee people, but I mean the staff. You're less inclined to pass judgment on those type of relationships when you know you've really got a great family of fellow people in the congregation.
I mean, we've
Because
made
they
a lot
don't-
of friends.
Yeah, they don't go away every 6 years. You
That's
know,
right.
The people here have been here, you know, with us for a long time. And we went from being about 2 minutes away from the church, just over the hill, to about 30 minutes. And 30 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but it, you know, it is 30 minutes. And,
It's a just.
and so obviously there's a draw that keeps us coming back. I mean, literally coming back, but I mean, it's to see everybody and to be part of a bigger family than just ourselves. And I, you know, people will all say it's the people, but I mean, it really is.
It
It's
is
the
the
people because the message is going to be delivered in a lot of different ways as pastors turn over and you know, there's the underlying message, but it's delivered differently. And if you get too hung up on how the delivery is affecting your perception of the message, you could have a shorter term view. If you know that the people aren't going to change and you're going to be with the people you've learned to, and love, you can that will drive you to staying with it.
We've seen people leave the church when different pastors have come,
Yes.
and we've seen them come back. So there's something about hope that has brought them back.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah.
And we've just stayed.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a favorite memory of what's going on here the last 39 years?
Well, I don't know, favorite memory. I don't know exactly.
You know, I mean, it's a terrific question.
Yeah.
I
I love the fact that our daughter married here,
Yes.
because there was a question then too, they thought about getting married up in Aspen.
Yes.
And I didn't push them either way, I just said, depends upon how many people you would like at your wedding. This is an easier place for people to fly into.
Yeah.
But,
Yes.
and I said, we'd love to have it at the church, but it's your choice. And I
Sure.
think that's probably a really special time in our lives, that she chose to get married here.
Yes, I think
And
so.
that her husband agreed.
Yeah.
And now your grandsons are there?
And our grandsons, yes, they come, and they always go to Bible school every summer. And now the older one has been helping out. He helped out last summer, and he's going to help out again
All right.
this summer, because he's 13 now. So And hopefully he'll do confirmation next year.
Yeah, that's a great continuity.
Yeah, and actually Christy was on the PDO board for I was on that too for 3 years. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And then she was on PTO board for Parents Day Out,
Parents Day
PDO,
off, yeah.
for 6 years. And she did some of their books on the computer for when Carol Davenport retired.
Yeah.
And then also, who was the other assistant? I can't think of her name now. Christy did that book too. So, and then her husband was on finance for 3 years, and then off, and then back on finance for 3 years.
Yeah.
So at least they've been part of the church as a married couple and
Sure.
family
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, yeah. A favorite moment is it kind of diminishes all the other great moments. I think the two things I got the most satisfaction out of being part of that construction committee that planned for the new sanctuary, and how we had to reverse really horses in the middle of the stream in terms of how it was financed. Being part of that with the likes of people like Dave Hull and Tom Skarka. And the rest of those people, Chris Brooks was part of it.
Yes.
That was a
They're
rewarding
still
thing,
around.
because that's a brick and mortar legacy that we all enjoy now. And then when I don't think it occurred at the time, but thinking now that we've had female pastors ever since, being part of that era on SPR, where we were encouraging people to take a broader long-term look at what it was going to mean to have somebody like Margaret, because a lot of people didn't honestly know her, even though she was our district
I
superintendent.
remember
That's right.
It was,
people asking me, how did I feel about a female pastor? And did we think this, because he was on SPR. And I said, well, I thought it was great. And I didn't know all of Margaret's history. I knew she had been the district superintendent, DS, prior to that. So, my answer was, I thought it was a good idea. But there were a lot of questions.
Yes.
but it was really an important time for us, and we've got another controversial era now, the church facing. I'm sorry that the Methodist Church has to be the lightning rod for the topic of where gays and lesbians fit into.
Of all churches, why ours?
But,
I
I'm hoping that we're gonna look back on this contentious time when there's a better resolution than right now, and feel like we feel about the day Margaret came on, and looking back now, what a great war story that was.
Yeah, thank you.
And I really do believe that and I really hope and believe there'll be a time this won't be the contentious issue that it is, because everybody has something to offer the church, and I'd like to see more people feel included. And it's just, this is a moment in time.
Well,
I
life
feel it's
changes as years go on. Life changes, and you need to adapt, and
been. Yeah,
And continue with the spiritual home.
that's
Right.
right.
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
so.
We talked about a lot of things over the last 39 years of your participation here. What would you like to see Hope do for the next 39 years?
I would love to see the membership grow and more young people take an interest in church. And I know that they're sidetracked by their children's activities and all the sports games that are on Saturdays and Sundays. But it is nice. Our daughter and her husband have several friends that are attending the church now. I can think of 3 couples, or 4. So I believe one of them has joined, and the others are attending. And I wish more young people would. It would be nice.
Yeah.
I love the change in services because, well, now we're going to 10 o'clock instead of early. We always went to early.
We did too. Yeah.
But it's nice to see the congregation full.
Yes. And more families, you're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it really is. And then when you have visitors, it's nice that they can see
Yeah, I think so.
that we're a good church. And I love all our music
Do
talent.
we do? Oh,
We
I
have a
agree.
lot of musical talent in this church. That's a real asset.
Membership numbers will always be an issue for any church, and especially your baseline churches now. Your denominational churches are facing a real threat in terms of their membership levels, because the non-denominational churches may be hitting on on cylinders that our churches don't, and it brings in younger people. And we see that, and it'll always be a tough discussion to have with someone that's wavering between, these large non-denominational churches that are more generic in their message and maybe their structure than we are. So we're always going to have that, but
That's
yeah.
what our son and his wife go to in San Diego,
Yeah,
a non-denominational
Yeah.
church.
um,
And they go regularly.
yeah.
Now that he isn't on air on Sunday morning, because that
Yeah.
happened for 2 years, he couldn't go because he was,
Yeah.
but now his work schedule's during the week, so.
So that would be a great goal, and not just the numbers, because that's an academic discussion, but the quality of bringing the young people in and their impact on what you hope is a growing church, as opposed to the older folks that have, in some cases, feel they've already served enough, that they're not as inclined to volunteer for the things that need to be done.
Yes.
So it's not just a numbers game with the overall congregation size, but trying to attract younger people that will jump in on the committees and the making of the coffees and the things that are outside the parameter of a committee, but still things that need to be done. But it's tough. I mean, younger people, I guess you could always say that, but I don't remember our lives being nearly as complicated when we were
Well,
bringing our kids up as what the kids
This
are
is
doing
because
today.
today, I didn't work when the children were little. And a lot of mothers work today, so they have jobs outside the home, and so the families are so busy that, and then with the sports and on the weekends, their
Yeah.
time, we had a little more time. We were
It seemed
busy,
that
but we
way.
had more time.
Yeah, so it's hard for them to hit on all the cylinders they need to in order to have a family, and the weekends really are their time to maybe kind of catch up with each other.
And they want
And,
to sleep in, especially kids.
They're exhausted.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
true.
yeah.
That's true. Well, we talked about a lot of people and activities and things that you've done here at Hope Church. Are there any other thoughts that you want to tell us about your experience here at Hope?
With our activities.
Or anything
Yeah, just,
in general?
Oh. Well, we obviously continue to participate because we enjoyed it. I don't know specifically,
I think you've really covered well. You're really good at this, Charlie. If I were you,
It's easy to ask, isn't it?
if this law thing doesn't work out, I think you.
We're at the bottom of my list.
That's
So if
okay.
you have anything else, you better say it soon.
Is there an unlimited amount of airtime on your camera? No, I think you've really
You really
covered everything
covered
that
it,
we would want to say.
And we've certainly
Uh,
enjoyed our life at Hope, or we wouldn't still be here.
Yeah.
So,
Me too.
and I think it's been a plus because we've gotten involved. And we've done things and we've gotten to know a lot of people. And I love the minute when we're greeting, because we know so many people, so when we're greeting, or if somebody sits next to us that I don't know, I always say, "Oh, are you a visitor?" And we've gotten to meet quite a few new people just by doing that and being friendly to them and encouraging them to come back. And Jen is the young gal that was doing the sound booth this morning.
Yes.
Yeah, Sturba. We met her the first Sunday. She sat with us the first Sunday she visited.
All right.
And I introduced us and we talked to her and I said, "I hope you'll come back." And she said, "I definitely will." And boy, she got plugged in right away. She wanted to know what she could volunteer for.
That's wonderful.
And we also met the people, Linda and Don. What's their last name? It's an easy one. Anyway,
Yeah.
they've joined also.
All right.
So
Yeah.
Well, I think you two are proof positive of the adage that you get out of something what you put into it, because you've certainly
Sure.
made the effort and been very active here, and I want to say thank you on behalf of the church for that.
Well, thank you so
It's
much.
been our
Charlie.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for all you do. And
Yeah.
someday we're going to catch up and recognize
somebody's going to
you.
have to interview you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, can I have a
We
couple
better
of shots
keep,
at that?
we better keep an outline of the questions.
Yeah.
We'll let the next historian take care of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a great ride, and my guess is, given the commitment to Memorial Gardens, we're probably going to be here for a long time.
You have a home here.
Yeah, I know where our next home is. I just haven't picked out the spot out there yet, but obviously there won't be much of a view.
I agree with you.
But we'll be with friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that Hope Church continues to do well and receive new younger people as members to keep its life going.
Well, thank you very much for sitting for this interview. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome.
You're very
so
welcome.
Yeah.